Good evening, folks, and welcome to the horror. Mark, are you crazy? Yes. Do you think they'll notice? Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Gershon. This week we are doing another movie review. This is Peeping Tom, directed by Michael Powell, starring Carl Bohm, Anna Massey, and Moira Shearer. Also got a nice cameo there from Miles Malleson, who you might know from several of the Hammer horror films back in the day. This is a British horror film. So yes, Peeping Tom is hailed nowadays as a cult classic. Some might even call it a masterpiece. If you listen to people like Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola singing its praises. And you wonder, when you watch the film, why was this film so maligned when it came out? It was just absolutely trashed by critics as this, piece of garbage cinema, And it's like such a beautifully directed film, so wonderfully shot. It's got this 1940s noir detective style to it, beautiful color scheme. Brilliant performance by Carl Bohm. Similar to that of a film that was released 2 months later, Psycho, which had kind of similar themes to it, and you wonder, why did this film fail so miserably while Psycho was so successful and such a big hit, and they're kind of similar in a lot of ways, but this film was trashed upon its release. Maybe because of the dark subject matter that we're dealing with, where Peeping Tom was maybe a little bit more upfront about that than Psycho was, even though Psycho did have kind of similar themes there with the killer. And the killer is a Peeping Tom, and that alone, and the name of the film alone, suggests that dark, sexual, deviant side of life, and that's what Mark Lewis is. He is kind of a sexual deviant. He is a Peeping Tom, a voyeur. But the film is very subtle in the way it handles it still. It's very classily handled, Although you do see him kind of peeping through windows, looking at people at times, and you get a little bit of creep factor there, but it doesn't show a whole lot. It doesn't show a lot of blood and gore or anything. You see very, very little of that. Even the kills are, off screen. You don't see any blood or the violence per se. Yeah. So there's no blood and gore, it's just suggestion, the power of suggestion in film, and that's why this film is so powerful. The way it's directed, the way it's shot, how it alludes to certain things. So Mark Lewis is a aspiring filmmaker, and he does work in film as a cameraman. He works on these kind of big budget Hollywood films, and on the side, he works as a photographer for kind of the smut magazine, kind of a soft porn magazine, like Playboy style. So there you get a little bit of insight to his sexual deviant behavior, But yeah, he's an aspiring filmmaker. Only the films that he makes are snuff films. People actually being murdered on screen by him. And he sits and watches these films that he's made of these women about to be murdered. And it's just to see basically the looks on their faces before they die, the fear. And yeah, he's a psycho. No question about it. But he's also a charming guy who's kind of a little bit of a shy, kind of nerdy, geeky guy that you could see where people could kind of relate to him. And one woman does. This woman by the name of Helen Stevens that lives in his house as a tenant. So he basically owns this house that he inherited from his father, who was a very famous psychologist. And yeah, he rents it out to people, you know. So Helen is one of the tenants who lives there with her mother, who is blind. And she kind of takes to Mark. He's a very handsome guy, you know, he's charming. Yeah, she kind of falls for him, you know. Meanwhile, he's out on the streets at night murdering young prostitutes. And you can see why he has become who he is. We get a little bit of insight into that when he shows Helen one of his films that was shot from when he was a child. His father was making movies of him kind of doing these day-to-day things in life. And also kind of tormenting him to, because he's studying the psychological aspect of him, and he's kind of scaring him and doing these weird things like making him look at young people making out, flashing a flashlight in his face when he's trying to sleep, putting lizards out in front of him and scaring him half to death, you know. All for his own gain, for his own research into psychology. And that's messed him up. So, you know, when you look at all the serial killers in real life, there's always that kind of aspect to them. They were abused as a child, and no different here. He was abused as a child. He was tormented by his father, who became this big famous rich guy, and he's all messed up inside, messed up in the head, and he's become a peeping Tom and a sexual deviant, a voyeur, if you will. So as the film goes along, you know, he's coming apart more and more at the seams. He even gets to the point where he films the crime scenes after the murders take place, and when the police find the bodies, he's out there filming, and the guy walks up to him, you know, what newspaper do you work for? You know, he's like, The Observer, you know. He's pretending to be a reporter, but he's actually filming his own stuff film, you know, he's adding to it. So yeah, wonder what his film would look like after all this, you know. Would it be a good film? Oh man, it's crazy. But yeah, brilliant performance by Carl Bohm. You see little insights along the way into his psyche, on how, you know, you see different sides to him, like when he's at work at the film studio and filming the movies, he's very professional, very, very well-spoken, very intelligent. But when you see him with Helen, who's this girl that he actually does kind of form a relationship, he does date this woman, and he does fall for her, and he's fighting with his own inner demons, trying not to let the psychotic side of him come to fruition, you know. He doesn't want to kill her. He wants to love her. And there's even one point where Helen is going on a date with him, and she says, why don't you put the camera away, you know? You don't need it tonight, do you? And he's very stricken by that. He's like, no, what? You know, he doesn't go anywhere without his camera. So Helen does see that there is some kind of inner turmoil going on with him, where she did see the video of his father filming him, and she knows that he's messed up inside somehow, and she wants to kind of help him. But little does she know that he's actually a murderer, you know. But her mother suspects it, you know. She knows there's something sinister going on with this man. She's very perceptive, you know, as oftentimes blind people are. They can see better than the normal person, the average person with 20/20 vision. They can see in a different sense. They have heightened senses. And she even sees when he's at the windows peeping in on them, you know, even though, like, how do you know that? So she's a very smart woman, and at one point, the killer, Mark Lewis, is watching one of his videos, and her mother is there, you know, watching him. And apparently she watches him quite a bit. She knows what's going on, and she kind of almost threatens to expose him at one point. And at one point, he takes the tripod, takes the blade out, and almost kills her. But, you know, his love for Helen kind of stops him, you know. So he does control himself, but the mother says, I don't want you seeing my daughter anymore, because she knows, she never outright says that he's a killer, but she's obviously on to him. So yeah, what a great movie. It's brilliant. I love the way it's shot. And it's really sad what happened with the director, Michael Powell. It ruined his career, basically, and he basically couldn't do any work in Britain. He had to go to, like, Australia to get any kind of work, but he never was successful again after that, you know. And Michael Powell was a very prominent director at that time, you know. When they had the big Hollywood premiere of the film, everyone that was watching was just shell-shocked and just left the theater without saying a word to the director or the cast or anybody. Everyone just walked out and ignored him, basically, you know, you should be ashamed of yourself, you know. But yeah, another thing is when Carl is in the studio working on a film, he kind of in the film studio, and he's filming a new movie with one of the extras in the film that he's working on, by the name of Vivian, who is this aspiring actress. Right now she's just working on an extra on the big Hollywood film that they're working on, but she's aspiring to be a star in her own right, so she relishes this opportunity to work on an actual film and be an actress herself, singing and dancing. She thinks she's going to be in a musical film or something. She see her dancing around, having a grand old time, while Mark is very serious and wants her to focus, and he wants to make this brilliant film, you know, and become a prominent director. But things don't go well, you know, as she is murdered by Mark with the tripod. It's crazy stuff, and it all comes to a head in the end, you know, as all good or bad things must come to an end. Good must triumph over evil in the end. And yeah, I highly recommend Peeping Tom. I think it was very ahead of its time, and I think anyone who is a horror fan can appreciate the style of this film, the style of direction. It's very artistic on the way it's filmed. It's like an art house horror film in a way. And I just think it's brilliant. The brilliant acting, the cast is just great. I love everything about it. It's so well written. Yeah, this is not trash cinema. This is a classic film in the vein of Psycho, you know, and I think it deserves a watch. I think it deserves a watch, so check it out. Give this film a chance, because I don't think you will be disappointed. Peeping Tom, directed by Michael Powell, starring Carl Bohm, Anna Massey, and Moira Shearer. I give it 2 devil horns way up, and thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Urshan, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared. Good evening, folks, and we got some brand new merchandise for you over at www.thehorrorcona.com, and that's CONA.com. Representing the Horror Corner. Great new design. We got the Morbid Hour live stream there, you got the Horror Hangout live stream there, and you got my nemesis, the Dark Fate. So grab your t-shirt over at www.thehorrorcona.com. And we also got this beautiful new mug. Look at that. Very, very cool. Thought that came out really nice. So grab your merchandise today over at www.thehorrorkona.com. Folks, don't forget to grab your Sean Patrick Urshan gear and represent the Horror Corner. Also, check out these awesome mugs we have, perfect for your coffee. And definitely check out the Horror Hangout live stream t-shirt and represent the legacy of the Horror Hangout. Check out the link in the description below this video.